And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Max Cohen and Dan Crawford from the Green Pole Podcast and HammyN.com. This episode, we're going to be looking back at Fulham's victory against Everton at Goodison Park. 3 in a row at Goodison Park. That feels good, guys. And I look forward to going through the show with my two co-hosts here. Dan was actually at the match, so we're going to have firsthand information on what he watched. And Max and I watched the match, so we have a lot to talk about. But before we do anything else, let's welcome everyone onto the show. First, Mr. Cohen, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great. We were just on the Green Pole a week or so ago, and now we're in Cottage Talk. So it's great to have Dan on. Always good to be with you, Russ. Yeah, can we play Goodison every week? That's my question.
That's great, my friend. It's funny because so many years of just terrible results at Goodison Park. Now we have 3 in a row. It's fantastic. Dan, that must have made you very happy. Like I said, 3 in a row. How are you doing?
Well, I feel like I aged about 75 years during the second half of that match. And the first half wasn't any better.
No, definitely not.
But yeah, look, delighted to get a result. I see that Max is already trying to make my season ticket absolutely redundant by moving all the matches to Merseyside. It's always nice to be thought of so highly by your friends. But yeah, delighted to be with you discussing the Fulham's first opening day win in the Premier League since 2013, lads. I mean,
it's fantastic.
Like, get out the cryon. Where's the ticker? Come on, get me a nice colour. Oh, he did it, but not quite like that. Anyway, over to you, right?
Okay, well, Max, I'll go to you first. I'm glad that Dan mentioned this because if you just watched the first half and you didn't continue, you would have thought Fulham might have ended up losing 2 or 3-0. I think that's safe to say, right? So just give me your opening thoughts on what you watched. Like I said, very bad first half. Substitutions made a difference in the second half. And Fulham got all 3 points, and that's the bottom line, right?
100%. I mean, this is something we've seen with Silva teams. We outperform the expected goals. We outperform the stats. We're not necessarily a team that is naive anymore. And that's what separates this Silva team from any other team we've seen in the Premier League in the past decade with Fulham, is that we're streetwise now. We never would have gotten a result like this in any of our relegation seasons in the past. I mean, let's be clear. We were the worst team. Everton should have won this match. I think that's clear to say. They had the better opportunities, hit the post, open goal missed. Yes, Jimenez hit the post for us, but we were lucky, and Leno played a fantastic match. But we're clinical, and we were resolute when it mattered. And we rode our luck. As Dan said, it was a nervy end to the match.
Sure.
First half, but we got the 3 points. So I'm just glad that was the result. But overall, looking at the performance, not very encouraging, in my opinion. And I think the signing of Traore is welcome because at times in this match, we were missing that final ball, that final burst of pace, that explosiveness that we had last year at times. Didn't really seem to be there. It was a bit more pedestrian.
Okay.
So end of the day, we got the win.
Okay. Before I go to Dan, I'm going to disagree with you. We're going to have our first disagreement. I think it's encouraging, not discouraging, because when you are not at your best, when you do not have your best performance and you find a way to win, we'll talk about smash and grab coming up next because I want to talk about the subject matter, smash and grab. But I don't care if that's a smash and grab. They got all 3 points. They found a way to win. Good teams do this, Max. As I said in my 5 takeaways yesterday, that's a mark, a hallmark of a good team, finding a way to win, not having your best, not basically playing your best, finding a way to win. That's the way I look at it. I agree with you. The performance, obviously not the greatest. Everton had a better performance, but who walks away with all 3 points? Fulham do. You can call it lucky, but I think you create your own luck. Over to you, Mr. Dan Crawford. How you doing? Boy, I just Goldman there. How you doing?
Well, I wondered what you were going to call me there, Russ. I mean, you can give me a new surname if you want.
Got a little tongue-tied there.
You can call me whatever you want. That's absolutely fine. Please, by all means, if the listeners want to tweet in with what my surname should be, they're very welcome to help you out there. We'll call that a little senior moment, shall we?
Yes, we could do that.
Back on the subject matter, I'd actually disagree with both of you. I had a rather spirited argument with seemingly everybody who I walked back with from Goodison Park because I didn't think Everton were especially good. I mean, they had some chances for sure, but as we've learned in our last spell in the Premier League, painful though it is to recall that, you don't win games unless you score goals. But also, you don't score goals regularly without playing quality football. And while Everton had the chances in the first half, they didn't play great football. I would posit to both of you
Yep.
yeah, I mean, black, white, and red. Everton would have won if they finished their chances, but they didn't. I mean, that's true, but you know, I would submit to you that Everton's chances had a lot more to do with sort of some very shaky defending. It looked like
Totally agree.
some of our players were as drunk as some of the people who I met up with prior to the match. Um, you know, Tim Ream looked a bit rusty. He was much better in the second half, but always that match up against Neil Maupay for both of our centre halves is going to be a problem. And the system that we play with the fullbacks going, so far forward, they're in another city, does kind of leave you without Palhinha. Things can happen, like what happened in the first minute with Tim trying to play that pass that he's played 100 times before, and it bouncing back, and suddenly you're not going to back a 30-something against Maupay. Fortunately, that guy can't finish his dinner, so that's useful. And we ground it out. On another day, a couple of those crosses would have got to Jimenez. I thought Jimenez was starved of service. I thought you could have taken any one of the front four off at half time. Silva hooked Willian, which I think was fair enough.
Right.
And, I will bow to no one in my love of Bobby Decordova-Reid because he does what Bobby Decordova-Reid does. But we fought hard. And I thought Reid and Lukic were pedestrian is the right word in the first. They weren't up with the pace. And what Dyche did was he just picked as many midfield as he could.
I know.
And he packed the midfield. And we couldn't get through the midfield. And we couldn't work out what to do when they all came charging at us in unison. But since none of them knew where the goal was, this was less of a problem than it could otherwise have been. And obviously we have Super Leno in goal. And, Arsenal have done it again this season. They've got a good goalkeeper. Although I would say to you, Leno is a better goalkeeper than Ramsdale and certainly the man Joe Bryan beat twice at Wembley. But what do I know? We've got Bernd Leno, and we got him for a snip. And some of those saves, particularly actually, I thought the one in the second half, which we'll probably get onto, from Iwobi, was an excellent save. And then, Nathan Patterson was very generous on the follow-up. Thank you very much. I did think a lot of these Everton players were preparing to play for Fulham later in their careers with the quality of their finishing. But we scored a magnificent goal, and it's meant to be opening thoughts, so I'll shut up now.
Okay, no problem, Dan. All right. I'm actually going to share some comments, and then I'll go over to you, Max, get your thoughts on these comments. This is from our friend Wayne Walden. Hi, Russ. I'd just like to say that we did not deserve to win against a very good Everton side, but Leno was our savior against Fulham. The counter to that is our friend Chris Goodwin. There's only one stat that counts, the full-time score. So thoughts
Chris's avatar rather gives him away there, I think.
Oh, yes. He's a Liverpool supporter. So
yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know if I agree with Dan per se because, were they playing great football? No. It's a Sean Dyche team. I don't think anyone said they were playing great football or would have done, but they were all over us. And I think that while they weren't, blowing us away with the style, they created chance after chance after chance. And just let's go through the chances in the first half. I mean, Decore just kind of Tim Ream had a big slip.
I don't need a 5-hour podcast, but go ahead.
Tim Ream had a big slip like Gerrard, and he was through, and Decore's through. That should have been a goal. I mean, Iwobi is just getting free on the left wing. Kenny Tete, as you said, Dan, was in a different zip code, different area code, not even in the match. And Iwobi, every time they broke, it looked dangerous. Second half, you had the Patterson open goal, which is a huge, huge chance. And Maupay had, a trio of shots in that first half. So, whereas we did nothing in the first half. I don't think we had a single attempt on goal in the first half at all. So that's kind of when I was basing it off. Everton played better than us because they did, because we offer nothing.
In the
But
first
you're
half.
right.
In the first half.
Yeah, second half it changed a bit. And
Who
I think
was
we
the
have to
better
give
team in the
Silva-
second half, Max?
We have to
Who
give
was the
Silva
better
massive
It's
credit.
all right. Let him carry on. I'm just winding
Okay.
up. Let him carry on. Come on.
Yeah, Silva massive credit for the subs, because I think in a different world he starts Mitro, he starts Pereira, he starts Reed, and that same first half happens for whatever reason. We don't have the impact to bring off the bench, but I think he knew they, Mitro and Pereira for sure weren't fully fit, and you can give him that boost, and the boost worked to perfection. And I love that double switch, very attacking intent, and all three subs combined for that goal.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share this comment from my friend Steve Reynolds. Poor first half. Ream was bad, but Tete had a nightmare. Could have been 3-0 down. We won't get that lucky again. Steve, you create your own luck. I disagree with you on that. Dan, your thoughts on Steve's comment here?
Well, he's not wrong. I mean, and I would say Max isn't wrong either. I just sort of looked at it. That Everton team is very functional. What I would say to you is, if they had Dominic Calvert-Lewin, then it could easily have been 3 or 4. But the thing about Iwobi is he gets into really good positions, but he doesn't really, for the quality, for the potential that he hasn't delivered enough. And I would say, look, Everton did create good chances, but it wasn't like they created some chances early on for our own ineptitude, and they had a little spell 10 minutes to go before half time. Right. And you had the disallowed goal as well, which they all got very exercised about. I'm sure we'll come on to that. But it was more for me, a Fulham team playing the kind of football that we've seen them play should be dealing with that. There were some issues, Ream. I was surprised that I was not surprised that Silva selected Ream, because I thought he would do.
Right.
But Ream is clearly, as we say in England, short of a gallop when you're talking about a horse, right? He hasn't had enough game time, actual competitive football, because he looked a little. He looks less reassuring than he would normally, understandably, if he hasn't played a full 90 minutes. Diop sometimes looks like he's sort of stepped off another planet to participate in these matches, and again, he got much better in the second half. One of your commenters was talking about Tete. It's interesting. I thought there was a real Jekyll and Hyde performance from Tete. Yeah, Stephen Murray there, you put it on the screen. Real Jekyll and Hyde performance from Tete in the first half. I was like, where's Kenny Tete? Why is he not there? In the second half, he was going down the right wing. He was there. And Jedi even had some nervy moments.
He did.
And then matured to play that. I do wonder that Jedi benefits from the defensive insurance of having Declan Reed there, knowing that he can go and Declan Reed will cover. I mean, that was very evident in the second half. But the most telling part was, as the Fulham fans were singing yesterday to the tune of an old Britpop song, Lukic in the middle of our pitch, Lukic making goals for Mitrovic. I think it's very good, actually. But Lukic didn't necessarily start the game in the kind of assert. He was trying to tackle for sure, but he didn't grip the game in the way that Helena would have done. And I think he's not a number 6; he's more a number 10,
right,
rather than even a number 8. But in the second half, he was holding the ball, utilising it better. And I think the Silva got into them, and we played more football. We showed Everton a bit too much respect in the first half. We were ponderous. It was like me trying to run after a heavy night out, or even not after a heavy night out, as you both know. Not good. But I think it was a bit Jekyll and Hyde. And I'm encouraged by the fact, as both of you said, good teams grind out results, right?
Exactly.
We played much better than that at Goodison Park and got hammered 3 or 4. Right? And I've seen them all. Right? So you kind of seen this movie before, but to see Fulham fight through it and win, I mean, wow. I mean, that's a real fillip when you consider, because I was talking to somebody on the way to the ground and they were very downbeat about it. They were like, well, we've got Everton, then we've got Brentford, then we've got Arsenal, then we've got Manchester City. We might have no points after 4 games. And I was like, for goodness sake, Clive, if you're not believing in this team, what's the point in coming all this way? And yeah, look, it's a great result because it sets us up really nicely to have a go at the Hounslow mob, who are playing at the moment, and they're not winning, so that's good.
Okay. I have a talking point that I actually mentioned on my show. Dan, I'll give you first crack at this because you watched it, and then Max and I can talk about this. Because when you look at the performance, and I know the performance wasn't great, how much did Fulham miss João Palhinha? I think they missed him a lot, Dan.
Well, I mean, what other sort of questions are you going to ask me? Is the Pope Catholic? Do bears go to the toilet in the woods?
Okay, Dan. Okay.
You know, I mean, how much did Fulham miss Palhinha? You know, this much and more. You know, there's like a gaping hole where Palhinha would have been. And I do think he's important because he sits in front of those centre-backs.
Right.
He becomes a third centre-back when sort of... Because Diop was taking... The other thing about the first half, both Diop and Ream would take the ball forward up to the halfway line and beyond, and then it'd have nobody to pass it to. Like they were waiting because all of Everton's midfield dropped back into a low... Well, they call it a low block now. You know, you had their sort of very agricultural centre-backs. And, like, they sort of had an idea of how Fulham were going to play. And there wasn't much movement. You know, Wilson seemed permanently stuck on the right flank in the first half. I don't know whether that was, like, contractually obligated. But he didn't seem to move very much. And we missed Palhinha for the simple thing that you can't replace Palhinha, you know. We talked about this, the two of you, I remember doing a podcast with Max earlier in the summer, and we were sort of speculating about how much Palhinha was worth. Well, you know, write down anything that Max says and quadruple it, because, you know, you're not going to find another player like Palhinha. You're just not. He's too good. And it's almost harsh comparing the rest of our midfielders to Palhinha because he's one of a kind.
He is, Dan. And I want to go to Max. I want to get his thoughts. We've had this discussion before, Max, but when we're talking about the performance, when you're talking about how bad the defense looked, right, the loss of Palhinha is glaring.
It is, and I think the best tactical analysis was what Dan said at the beginning, right, was that when Tete and Robinson go forward, Palhinha dropping back gives that security, and without him, we missed it massively, you know? So that I thought was a big miss because it made Tete's four-ways look even more risky just because Lukic stepping back there isn't the same security blanket as Palhinha. And on that front, you know, was that the best timed shoulder injury of all time? You could argue. Like, right. Because now he's not in the shop window. He's not in the shop window at all. And if he's been playing well, I think, you know, I mean, look at the silly money that Chelsea are playing for Caicedo.
Oh, it's insane.
I mean, imagine if they knew João Palhinha was a couple blocks down the road. I mean, they would.
Well, they know, and they've decided not to go in, not to put any money on the table. I mean, is that stupid or you know?
I'm happy, but he's injured, so I wouldn't buy an injured player for silly money.
Yeah,
so.
they're doing this before he was injured. So I mean, the really good thing is Palhinha's injury is not severe, and he'll be trained. He trained last week.
Right.
He trained this week. With a fair wind, he's likely to be available for the game next weekend.
I hope so.
And that, therefore, is, well, we all hope so, but it becomes, you know, when he went down and I was watching the game in a bar with no commentary, because, you know, some English bars play hip-hop music instead of the commentary of these matches. And you can imagine how much that infuriated me because I was like, oh my God, you know, this was almost worse than my friend's kids having an accident. It's like João Palhinha has gone down red alert. It's not, by the way, I apologise. But, you know, like the saving grace is, as Max says, yes, he's out the shop window, but I'm not too bothered because people have to show the money big style in this window. I mean, I'll go as far as to say, we sold Palhinha in the remainder of the transfer window. I'll be looking for a new coat. So, yeah. The key is that he's likely to be available against Brentford, so we won't need to miss him that much. But the astute tactical thing to do, and I'll keep saying this, is when there's no Palhinha, just put Reed where he used to play.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, it's glaringly obvious, but it's not how Marco Silva, you know, it's almost anathema to Marco Silva to have a player who simply is a stopper, a la Kevin McDonald, Billy Bremner, Tyler Adams. You know, I was going to say McKennie, but it doesn't seem to be what McKennie used to do. You know, someone who's simply in the team to break up the opposition's attack. It's not what Silva does.
Okay, very good. All right, guys, let's move on. One more topic, and then we'll really get into breaking down this match. And I want to talk about this match being called the smash and grab. Now, I agree with it, okay? But I think, Dan, your thoughts, I think smash and grab sometimes has a negative light put on it. I actually think a smash and grab is not a terrible thing. It's actually a good thing because it shows you found a way to win. This is a smash and grab, okay? But what are your thoughts about this being called the smash and grab, and some think of it as a negative?
Well, I think, like, you know, much of football analysis is reductive, right? I mean, I've read at least 7 of the match reports in the national papers here, and Fulham have got little column inches about that big. You know, we're just about to get a mention of the goal, and it's sort of scruffily tucked away at the bottom. You know, Bobby Duckwood over, he tapped in the winner, and that's it. You know, because the big story is, Everton look really bad, or you know, Sean Dyche wants X, Y, and Z, and he hasn't got it, and there you go. That's fine. Now, actually, I don't have a problem with Fulham sort of smashing, grabbing it, or you know, grinding out a victory, or stealing it in any way, shape, or form. Because there was a time when you watched the Silva and Jokanovic teams, you thought, well, the only way we're going to win is if we're allowed to play the kind of football,
Right,
in the Championship, that Silva wants to play. And we struggled against teams who stopped us from playing. Everton very effectively stopped us from playing. And there's no, you know, they are allowed to do that. I did wonder what sort of Stuart Atwell was smoking on a number of occasions, because once again, William got booked, Tete got booked for time wasting.
yeah.
Marco got booked for, I don't know. I told him he has to swear at the referee in Portuguese or Spanish or some other language, right? But they're like, you know, they obviously, and no Everton player seemingly could do anything wrong. And you have to find a way to win. Professional sport is about winning. I mean, that might be anathema to Fulham Football Club because we never win anything. But you do want to try and win. And it doesn't matter because, you know, at the end of the day, look in the newspaper. What does it say? Everton 0, Fulham 1.
That's right.
This isn't ice skating. You don't get marks for artistic impression, right? You know, in the Olympics where they get those judges together and they rate, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
You know, there are lots of sports where it's not just about what you do, it's also about how you do it. Football isn't one of them, right? There are contrasting styles, and sometimes you can't play because there is another team there. I mean, we could have not been on the pitch for most of the game, and Everton probably still wouldn't have scored, right? Because they were having one of those days. And the most important thing is that we found another way to win.
Exactly.
You know, like we are going to have to grind out results because we're not at the level of a sort of top 6, top 8 team that's just able to play football all the time and has 2 11s that are just going to play remarkably sexy football. And thank you very much. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. We will be in time if we stick with Marco Silva and Mr. Calm keeps being exceptionally generous with his billions. We can get there. But at the moment, not so much. So you have to, and you know, the absolute joy and carnage experienced on various modes of transport yesterday, following Fulham's victory, nobody cares. Like, you know, I would take a scruffy 1-0 win every week if it meant that we could, you know, win the league. It'd be marvellous.
Of course.
So, yeah, everyone who gets sort of says, wouldn't it be nice to play better football? Well, sure. I mean, there's lots of things I would like. And anyway, I'll let Max talk.
Okay. Max, I want to go to you, get your thoughts on the topic of smash and grab. The reason why I brought this up, and I had it in my 5 takeaways, is that I'm big when you win a match, you win, right? We could talk about the performance. We could talk about the negative parts of it, but in the end, you won. So I think when you say smash and grab, I think it has this negative light towards it, whereas I see it as a positive. As Dan said, it's finding a way to win. I don't like marginalizing victories. I think when you lose, you rip your team all the way you want to rip them. When you win, I have a hard time doing it as much. You can criticize, but in this case, I think smash and grab is what it was, but I think that's a positive.
I think it's even more satisfying at times to have
There
a
you
smash
go.
and grab.
Wow.
It was
There you
funny.
go.
It was funny that Everton had chance after chance after chance after chance and couldn't get a single goal.
How many times have we seen Fulham in that situation?
Yeah, it was amusing. And I think Everton as a football club is an amusing just entity. Proud history, never been relegated from the Premier League, been run to the ground in recent years. I mean, remember that James Rodriguez and Ancelotti as their manager, and they just sign all these like luxury players, and now then they always revert back to what they had Allardyce and Sean Dyche now, and they're funny. It's a funny club, and they've had a terrible run of it recently. And for once, we can be on the other end of a kind of laughing stock, right?
Right.
For so long, it's been us, right, Russ? You said having all the chances, can't finish, over reliance on one player. Their Calvert-Lewin, ours could be considered as Mitrovic in the past. And here we are, on the right side of the joke. And that's why I love the smash and grab, because we didn't really deserve it. But as we've talked plenty already, it doesn't matter who deserves it. It matters who wins.
Exactly. That's the bottom line. Who won the match? I listened to a ton of commentary from the Everton perspective, and I can just tell you that it was all about Maupay. It was all about Dyche. In fact, I saw that I listened to Maupay continually on this podcast being referred to as moped, which I kind of thought was kind of funny. But but in the end, I understand that they're focusing on Everton, but we should be focusing on Fulham. We should be focusing on what Fulham did. They found a way to win, and that to me is the bottom line. Okay, guys, let's get to talking about this match. Before we do, let's talk about the starting 11. I'll get us going on this before I go to you, Dan. And I actually was surprised. I know you said you weren't surprised that Calvin Bassey didn't start. You thought Ream would start. I think this was a mistake by Silva. This is just my opinion. I know why he did it. Continuity with playing up at Goodison Park. But I thought Calvin Bassey should have started, Dan. That was really my number one criticism here. I was okay with Raul starting. I was fine with that. I could have gone with Mitro as well. But the one that stood out for me was Tim Ream starting, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's harsh to call it a mistake because we've got a clean sheet. Maybe it was more by luck than judgment, but maybe you were never a centre half. Like we prize those clean sheets, like I don't know, Olympic gold medals when you're a Fulham defender. They're very valuable. And I would just say this is something Silva's done, and he's very serious about it. When you've proven that you can be a serious key player in the team, you get the shirt back. And Calvin Bassey is yet to prove it. He's yet to play a Premier League game. He's had a good pre-season. He looks like a good defender. But who's the guy who's been there and done it all of last season? Right? Who's battle hardened? Who knows exactly how Silva wants to play? Now, maybe it was a gamble because Ream had significantly less football than he would have liked. And let me tell you, there's no one more disappointed about that than Tim Ream. He wanted to be out there playing a lot more. He felt, there was no need to be quite so cautious in respect of his game time. I think that came through on his own book post. I don't know if the pair of you have been listening to that over the summer. Some really interesting conversations with some of his Fulham colleagues, with Andreas Pereira and Anthony Robinson. Well worth checking out. But he got a clean sheet. I mean, the ones that I was surprised about, I had an inkling that he was likely to be Raul Jimenez, and he nearly scored. Didn't do very much. We didn't get him the ball. That's the thing we didn't talk about very much in an extended preamble. Didn't get him the ball in the area.
Right.
When we did, he nearly improvised a really good finish. Very unlucky. The ball was behind him, swiveled on it. That on another day that hits the post and goes in. And that was his last touch. The one that interested me was Kearney in the 10, as opposed to some of the other options. And I think that Black, White, and Fred, who might need to change his name now, although it might be his name rather than the player we were about to sign allegedly. I don't know. You'll educate me. Russ in a minute. That Kearney and Jimenez looked a little bit samey in terms of pace. They're both occupying similar parts of the pitch, and Jimenez is a live wire. He can do things, but Kearney looked short of a gallop as well. You know?
Okay.
So it was interesting, but we got there in the end, and that's the beauty of it. I think Max referenced it. How refreshing is it that we had substitutes who could change the game when it wasn't going at 0-0? Not when
It's a wonderful point.
Down.
It's a wonderful point. Look at the brain on Max, I'll say, because he actually brought up a very good point. Max, here I am criticizing the starting 11. We could talk about Kearney as well, but we did have a strong bench, and that did change the game. So maybe there was a method to the madness.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense for an away match like that in some respects to play it closer, tighter for the first 60 minutes and bring on the big guns after the fact to get that kind of impact, because I don't think the other way around we would have had those impact subs, right? But yeah, Kearney I think is the one I want to focus on because we haven't talked about him at all actually until now.
Right.
I felt for him a little bit, you know. I mean, listen, he got the captain's armband, Premier League start of the season. This is what he wants, and he just wasn't his day, you know, off the pace. I don't think he played very poorly, but he didn't quite make the impact Kearney would have wanted to. And there was just one instance in the first half in the attacking third, he just mistimed the pass, and we could have really kicked on. And he kind of
I know what you're talking about.
Yep. Unfortunate situation. It just wasn't his day. But just taking a step back, Tom Kearney. I mean, it's August 2023. He captained Fulham in the first game of the Premier League season. That is an amazing achievement for Kearney. How many times have we been on this show talking about what's Kearney's future? Will he ever come back from injury? Will he ever revisit the form we saw in, let's say, 2017, right? And I just think, personally for him, I was delighted that he started, delighted for the club captain, because oftentimes it didn't look like it would really kick off for him at Fulham at the top flight. And he even had that hamstring injury, 2 weeks ago in DC at the match. And, I feared for him. So glad to see him play, but I wager we won't see him start many matches this season.
Okay, great stuff talking about the starting 11. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about the second half of the show. We're going to break down the match. We'll end with man of the match. Okay, guys, let's get to it. Let's do our first half analysis. And Mr. Crawford, I'll go to you first. I could talk about all the great chances that Everton had, but it's not an Everton show. But the big point I want to talk about in the first half obviously is the play of Bernd Leno, and made save after save, keeping Everton at bay. I'll be talking separately about the disallowed goal, but just give me your thoughts on what you watched at Goodison Park. It was, as you mentioned, a poor first half for Fulham, but Bernd Leno was the difference here.
Yeah, there's probably only two Fulham goalkeeping performances that come to mind, and it's certainly in the Premier League era that I can remember where this was as good as, that are comparable really. Mark Crossley at Newcastle, where he saved everything. Well, Crossley, he did let in a goal, but and Edwin van der Sar, where he saved everything at Highbury in 2003. But look, Leno just gives you so much confidence. Like even the most routine of saves, you think maybe you have a chance. I mean, that one, the one where I thought Mopé was offside, it was like literally 2 or 3 yards from the goal line. I don't know. Ream certainly thought he was offside. Although maybe it was one of those things that I used to do as a defender, put your arm up for an offside when you know you've let your man go. But that looked like a very, that was a ridiculous piece of goalkeeping. And obviously there's the one that Max mentioned earlier where Decore, it seemed odd that Decore was Everton's prime attacking midfielder, because he went straight through on goal, and I was like, oh my goodness. And
was he playing more of a second striker in this?
I don't really know. Look, I'm just glad that there will be someone somewhere whose job it is just to break down what on earth Everton were doing, And I think Sean Dyche had a number of players that he wanted to get in the team for athleticism. And the ball unfortunately fell to the Decore a few times in and around the edge of the box. But look, Leno, the saves are excellent, but I would mention just a couple of other things that you get perhaps from being at the game. He radiates confidence. He radiates confidence. So the defenders will pass him the ball into a tight spot where two attackers are running down with him because he can utilise the ball with his feet. He'll come and claim the ball, which we'll talk about
Right.
shortly, I expect. But also he'll distribute the ball well with his feet, with his hands, and he's a leader. You hear him, even when we're quite loud as we were yesterday. You can hear him shouting at the defenders and the rest of anyone really that matters. So for where they have to stand at set pieces, what's this guy? You know, frequently after the ball's gone wide, he's making a gesture to somebody about where they could have been, and it's that leadership that's so important, as well as the goalkeeper.
Okay. Over to you, Max. Your thoughts on Leno's performance. We're just focusing on the first half. And Dan brings up some good points about his leadership helping the defense. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's spot on. I mean, everything was just completely accurate from Dan. People in the comments are saying this. Colin Bugler, $8 million for Leno, still don't seem real. One of the best signings of recent memory. I mean, there are almost no words for how lucky we got in many sense, but also we did great business. Let me not diminish what we did.
Yeah.
But I mean, he, in my opinion, would walk into any top 6 side in the goalkeeping position on this form. And I think I saw a stat somewhere. I'm not a big XG guy, but it said that he saved 3.3 XG last.
It's some crazy
match,
number.
That was the
I've
most
seen
done
that.
He's one of the best keepers in the league, and he doesn't get talked about enough because he plays at Fulham.
No.
But if that's Ederson or De Gea or I don't know Allison, that's all over the papers. And Dan made a great point about the coverage. Right, as everything is about. Everton were wasteful, and another season they're overly reliant on Calvert-Lewin, and Dyche didn't get his signings in. Bernd Leno had an amazing match against a lesser keeper. I think Everton are 2-3,
and that's not the
up.
Story. That's not the story. It should be the story.
Leno
right?
should be in the headline, and instead it's about Dyche and Everton, and that's just the way it is, and that's fine. But what a player! What a great player! And I don't know if you guys saw the pronunciation guide on Twitter when he's like.
I saw that. It's Bernd Leno, right?
He's funny. He's good banter. So
yeah, I've actually changed how I say it now because I saw that. So very good.
Quite funny for a German, yeah.
Okay.
I knew you were going to say that, Dan. I knew you were going to crack that joke.
Dan, I'm going to come right back to you because now we're going to talk about the controversy, or as say in England, controversy, about the disallowed goal. Now, what's interesting here, I've watched some commentary from over here in America. I listened to a bunch of Everton podcasts and talk on it, and they were adamant that this goal should have counted. Dan, you were there. Your thoughts on the disallowed goal?
Yeah, it happened right in front of him. Well, not right in front of me, obviously, because I'm not on the pitch, but I had a fairly about as good a view as you could get because I was in line with where Leno went to claim the ball. He claims the ball. There's contact with the defender, or Tarkowski, and then the ball is on the floor. Now, it used to infuriate me for years that goalkeepers didn't got caught this protection. But it's the world we live in, and I think I've referenced it a couple of times in excellent. I've referenced it a couple of times in conversations with both of you. The Premier League still allows people to get away with an awful lot in terms of contact on goalkeepers that wouldn't happen in continental competition across Europe. All right, Leno comes against the ball. Tarkowski does that thing that Harry Kane does very effectively, although I won't do it in the Premier League anymore. Making a back for an opposing player and standing his ground. And the thing that people miss is that Michael Keane puts it in the goal. Michael Keane, I think it is, and he would have been offside. and there's a suspicion of handball as well. So okay, even if what would you like to? What would you like to hit his arm as well? That was that was the other, that was the other part. So what would you like the goal to be disallowed for? Could be for the foul of the goalkeeper. If you don't think it's a foul of the goalkeeper, well, maybe Stuart Atwell wouldn't have disallowed it for handball because we know he's not keen on penalising handball. But surely there would have been a consideration of offside. Therefore, if you're having to sort of get three things to go your way for it to go in the goal, then maybe it should be disallowed.
Okay. Interesting from Dan, who was there. Great analysis. Max, what are your thoughts about all this?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to add after that. I thought the clear thing was a handball. If I'm being honest, I don't think it was a foul on Leno. I just don't. I think in the world we live in, that's so weak. And I think Leno was the only mistake he made all match, I think, was not really coming down with that properly. I thought Tarkowski didn't do anything wrong. It hit his hand. That's infringement, but I don't think he fouled him. I think Leno's jumping and he made a meal of it. And then the offside thing, great. Yeah, it wouldn't have counted anyway. But it was very funny to hear all the Everton fans. I'm sure it's better in person. I'd love to hear what Dan had to say about being at Goodison and hearing the cheers and then quickly turning into disappointment. I think that's one of the most amusing things at a football match when the opposite team thinks they have a goal and then it gets disallowed and it's like, oi. So.
Okay, I'm going to read this comment from Ben Lawrence, and then I'll go back to you. The law states if the keeper has two hands on the ball, he has it under control and is his ball. It then came away from him when coming down and it hits Tarkowski's arm as well.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to whether you think he's in control of the ball, because Max makes a reasonable point. Max and I rarely disagree about much, but
it happens.
Perhaps my spectacles are a little bit more black and white than Max. My metaphorical spectacles, if I may say. It's first time this season Steve Reynolds agrees with Max. Blimey, we'll have to get a hashtag going. I agree with Max. Although not on this one. Look, Max makes a point. If you don't think Tarkowski has fouled him, and all the commentators in this country, including Alan Shearer, were raging about the fact that this was disallowed. But if you don't think that Tarkowski has fouled him, then I suppose you would be less bothered about the ball coming away from Leno. I would submit that Leno was coming to claim the ball,
right,
and someone obstructed.
Well, that's the way I saw it. He was obstructing him.
Because you're meant to allow a player to play the ball. And it's the referee's decision whether there's an obstruction at play. And I think what we benefit from is Atwell is some way from the play, looking through bodies. And what he sees is Leno's coming to claim the ball. He's likely to claim the ball. The ball goes away from him under challenge from Tarkowski, and he's given the free kick even before the ball goes in the net. Right? What was it? Would I be upset about it if Fulham scored that goal? You bet I'd be upset about it if Fulham scored that goal. But look, as I say to you, it wouldn't have counted anyway. So let's move on to the next technique.
Okay, let's move on. Very good point. We talked enough about the disallowed goal. Let's talk about the second half. And guys, I think we have to start with this. And Max, I'll go to you because I think two things stood out for me in the match. One is obviously the play of Bernd Leno. Two were the substitutions. I think that changed the match as well. So let's talk about the first substitution because Bobby Decordova-Reid comes on to start the second half. And as Dan already said, he thought any one of several players could have come off, but he decided to take Willian off and put on BDR. What did you think about this decision to start the second half?
A lot of people I was watching with speculated it had to do with the booking that Willian got right before halftime. He also just kind of looked off the pace in general. Dan said he could have taken anyone off. Willian, though, just wasn't really up to it. I thought Willian was arguably better than Harry Wilson, though. But Harry Wilson was quiet, didn't have a very good game. I loved the first touch he had in the second half.
Yes.
That cross. I mean, that was that honestly was one of the best parts of the match for me because that is a wing play, which you need when you're playing inverted wingers who want to cut in. It was just such a great. He put Ashley Young back where Ashley Young. I don't know how old Ashley Young is, but he's
38.
He's pushing 40. Yeah, it made him seem like it showed his age. But listen, Bobby Decker-Reed, give him all the credit he deserves because this guy. He's loved by the fans, but does not get the credit sometimes. I've been quick to judge him in the past. I think he's been a poor finisher at times. But again, someone like Kearney, he's been at the club now since 2019. It's almost 4 seasons now. Just consistently scores goals. He hasn't scored a ton of goals, but the goals he does score just seem so important. And it's great to see him still kicking on in the Premier League. So I was glad he came on. And some people thought he maybe should have started.
Okay, very good. All right. Dan, over to you. I want to talk about Raul Jimenez because we've talked about him a little bit. You've already talked a little bit about him. So he hits the post. This is actually a really nice shot by Jimenez, and he didn't have much service throughout the match, but he showed his quality, even if it was just this one opportunity. Your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, before we get to that, I'll just say there's nothing wrong with people pushing 40, Max. You know, that happens to you one day.
On the football pitch. Unless you dream.
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, be careful who you impugn with that comment. It's coming like a train towards me. So yeah, you can tell from the hairline. Anyway, yes, we were going to talk about Raul Jimenez.
Yes,
I love Raul Jimenez. Right, I think it's a really good signing. I think, how good is it to have 2 top quality Premier League centre forwards? You've got Mitrovic, you've got Raul Jimenez. I think he can only get better as he gets used to playing for Fulham. You know, we will speculate about whether he will have that chance, because the interesting question that follows from a discussion of Raul Jimenez is, well, does he start again? You know, because we didn't really do enough to get him the ball, as I mentioned earlier. When we did, it's a lovely effort. You know, he has no right to hit the post from there, really, and it just indicates his class to make that opportunity almost for himself. But I think there's more to come from Jimenez. And the very interesting part about this, and forgive me for introducing this into the discussion, is the news that broke last night. Adama Traore on a free transfer.
yes.
2019. Adama Traore to Raul Jimenez was what the kids call a cheat code now. You know, they had a seriously good understanding at Wolves.
That's great.
I'm sure that would have played a part in getting, and indeed, Traore's comments indicate that he spoke to Raul Jimenez about Fulham before signing, and Jimenez was certainly very complimentary. So I think, look, how much we will see of Raul Jimenez is rather like Max's comment about Tom Kearney. You know, we don't know, but it's great. Football is a squad game now. You know, we saw that in reference to the previous question. You need a strong squad. That's why Marco has been sort of like, where are my players? You know, come on, give me some players that I can utilise. And so to have Jimenez as an option, because the alternative would have been playing a half-fit Mitrovic or, you know, Carlos Vinicius. And, you know, let's not forget Carlos Vinicius in this occasion. Finished the season really strongly, you know, and clearly knows where the goal is as well. So you've got 3 sources of goals. So, you know, we're sort of being spoilt now by the Fulham hierarchy, having a number of centre forwards who Marco could choose from. I mean, you know, this is like heaven for me.
Okay, Dan, I'm going to go right back to you because I want to talk about the inclusion in the lineup. I believe it was the 58th minute for Mitro and Andreas come on. And I think their addition to bringing in Bobby Decker-Reed really changed things for Fulham. I think it's the 3 of them together. They obviously will talk about the goal coming up. But what I want to talk to you about, because you were there, let's talk about the situation because Mitro goes down, Dan, and indications that I was watching looked like he was coming off and Vinicius was coming on. You had something that you shared with me off air. Share with me on the show now about what you watched.
Yeah, so we're obviously, so I don't know if Max has been to Bixen Park to watch the game. I don't know. Okay, well, there we are. So we're in the corner, in the other corner, to where Mitrovic goes down. Because Fulham were defending the corner at that point. And there's a bit of grappling, and we conceded the corner. And Mitrovic, I think, either got his head to it or was like manhandled in the incident that led to the corner. And he stays on the floor, and we're all like, "Oh, Mitrovic is time wasting." Like, excellent. And then someone said it's a bit early for time wasting. We can win this, lads, and everyone sort of laughed. And then we looked up, and Leno was gesticulating to that. Mitro was waving his hands around in the air and saying, "I need some treatment." And the referee was getting very slow to take control of the situation. And Leno actually did that sort of universal sign for substitution, right? And it looked like Mitrovic was coming off because Marco was talking to Vinicius on the sideline. He'd only been on about 3 minutes by this point, I think. And Everton actually, the PA announcer actually announced the substitution before Mitrovic had gone off the pitch. He was walking around by the corner flag at the Gladys Street there. And they announced that he was going off. And Mitrovic just sort of like put his hands in the air and was like, "Well, I'm not going off. I'm coming on. I'm coming back on." And Outwell waited about a minute and a half to allow Mitrovic to come back onto the field. I think there's some sort of regulation now.
Right.
New change in the rule. Don't quote me on that. But obviously, like, the physio came on and treated him. And I did say in my player rating that perhaps this was an indication of how scared Everton were of Mitrovic. They wanted him to be substituted as soon as possible, because even after he'd come back on, the big screen that during the game lists the lineups had him coming on as a substitute and then being substituted. But yeah, it's a hairy moment, and you may have seen there's a photograph on on social media of Mitrovic in on crutches.
Yes,
as it was referenced that in the comments. He did leave at Euston Station and was on the train on crutches. But I understand this is the same ankle that he's had some problems with for the best part of a year to 18 months now. That the ankle injury that so perturbed him prior to the World Cup. So I understand that the crutches are somewhat of a precaution, because clearly he played the remainder of the game, and I think he will just do light training, if any training, for the next couple of days, because he's had some experience of managing this injury. There's no doubt if it was serious, they'd have taken him off immediately. But I'm glad they didn't, because we talk about the goal and Mitrovic's role in the goal in the second one.
Okay, well, let's get to it. And I'm going to give you the honors, Max, to talk about the goal, which comes in the 73rd minute. All right, so I want to get your thoughts. This was all three substitutes being involved in the goal. It ends up eventually getting to Bobby Decadovere, but it's set up for Mitro, then goes to Pereira, and then eventually you go to Bobby Decadovere, which is kind of a tap-in. It's been looked as a tap-in, but still he had to put it in the back of the net. Thoughts on the goal? This is where we talk about smash and grab.
Yeah, I think this showed Mitro as a complete player. He's not getting on the end of it. He's
Great point.
He's playing that through ball, perfectly weighted.
Great point.
Love the vision. Yeah, and Pereira, credit to him for sliding, getting anything he could on this ball, because he knew Bobby was free in the back post. He just had to get it to him. And it really reminded me of the goal we scored against Southampton away, when it was Harrison Reed who did that. I think it was to Vinicius who tapped it in. Just the person putting the cross kind of slide tackles it and squibs it across the goal. But it was very satisfying to see that move develop. And it was a goal at the perfect time, because I think if we score that in the first half or at the start of the second half, maybe Everton have more of a chance to get the fans into it and to mount a comeback. But it was just kind of late enough in the match that it seemed to break their spirits, and they couldn't really mount a proper push to get the equalizer. So great goal, great timing. Delighted for Bobby.
Okay. Over to you, Dan. I want to talk about the goal, but I also want to talk about the fact that Bobby Decadovere almost had another chance to score shortly after that, which is great. And I don't know if this was an issue with Fulham's tactics or it was a problem with Everton's defense. But as they were talking about in the broadcast, that Fulham were really trying hard to get these overloads, and they were getting it at the end of the match. So your thoughts about that?
Well, a couple of things. The goal was magnificent. So Max has summed it up really well. Lovely ball from Mitrovic. You know, somebody who's much older than I am, and there's no problem with age, as I keep reiterating on this podcast. Compared it to a pass that Johnny Haynes played in his prime, and there's no bigger compliment to any Fulham player than to be compared to Johnny Haynes in the way that you spread those balls through for an inside ball. I would just like to mention, you know, the bit of skill with a big defender converging down on him from Pereira, where he sort of stretches and manages to get that direction and power on the cross to get it to Bobby Decordova, sensational. And you know, Bob's, it was a wonderful moment as a fan at a ground, when even as a Fulham fan, you know that Bobby Decordova is going to score as that ball comes across, because he's not Ivan Cavallero or Anthony Knockaert. You know, it's unfair to name those two, but I just did it anyway. You know Bobby's going to tuck it away, and I will just say there's scenes, there's a couple of photographs and videos that you would have seen of people celebrating deliriously. You know, I nearly got knocked over the sort of second level at Goodison, because some people were very excited, young lads were very excited behind me. But you know, all's fair in celebrating a goal, isn't it? And then you're right, like I mind the head though, you probably didn't pick up on that, Russ, when you were talking about Bobby Decordover's second challenge.
Yes.
You should have headed him, and he actually tries to guide it. But yeah, so I think there's a fitness issue with some of Everton's players. They certainly looked more tired in the second half. I certainly think the fatigue of playing that high intensity football caught up with them and helped us. And you may come to this, but it wasn't just Bobby Decordova who had a really good chance at the far post in the second half. Mitro has one as well, where he sort of brings down the ball beautifully. She does a little shuffle, and Pickford does well, but you could tell from Mitro's reaction he's like, shit,
Right. He did. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Dan, but I want to go back, and Max, maybe I'll go to you and talk about the situation with the opportunity that I think Fulham deserved the penalty. If we're going to talk about the disallowed goal, right, for Everton, I think this washes it out, because I think Fulham should have had a penalty here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the commentary around it was just totally stupid, because they said, oh, it was tucked in.
How different was this from the Willian situation in the FA Cup? It's the same thing.
Oh, no,
because Willian was on the goal line, I think.
And preventing as well.
But this was still a penalty, because
right.
If the arm's tucked in, it wouldn't have hit the elbow. The very fact that it hit the elbow meant it wasn't tucked in. I mean, his arm was out, and it was close range, and I can understand why it wasn't given, perhaps. But for me, that's a penalty, and I think we were very unlucky. And it just seems like they didn't even look at it very long. You know, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, the check's been done, etc. It's over. It's like, I thought that was hard. It was hard done by for us. It seems like we always don't get the rub of the green on these kind of handball situations. I remember when hit Lamina's hand against Tottenham a couple years ago. Our goal got disallowed. Like it's frustrating for us. But in the end, we didn't need it. And let's be honest, guys, if we are given the penalty, we wouldn't have scored it. We wouldn't have scored it. There's no guarantee it's a goal.
Why did I know he was going to go there, Dan?
We know. No, I do wonder if it was an act of generosity from
we're looking at it the wrong way.
Like just saving us from more heartbreak. I mean, I would have been interested to see who would have taken such a penalty had it been given.
Could have been Pereira. Would he have gone there? Would Silva have actually had?
I don't know. I mean, and the other thing I mentioned to you off air, I was very concerned that Mitro was running after the referee in a fashion that, we couldn't believe it. And I think the parallel I mentioned to you just before we came on was there was a penalty in the Brighton-Luton fixture yesterday, where I think a Brighton defender was penalised for his arm in a less unnatural position than Tarkowski. And Tarkowski knows what he's doing. He's blocking the shot with his arm. I mean, that look, as I said to you, I don't know what a handball is anymore, so I just appeal for anything. If it vaguely hits, if if it just hits your fingernail in the penalty area, that could be a penalty. Who knows?
Sure.
And the thing is, when you're watching in the stadium and the game is still going on, you don't know that a VAR check is there, and neither did the players. Because Everton got a corner. I think that was the next stoppage in play. It was an Everton corner. And you saw sort of 5 Fulham players go around the referee, and then Tim Ream sort of gesticulated and went, "Lads, we've got a corner to defend. Come on now." It's I mean, it was obviously a penalty, but as Max said, somebody would have probably ballooned it into Liverpool had it been given. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. I do want to mention, because again, I was listening to a lot of commentary from Everton. Yes, they did have a couple of chances to score in the second half. They had several in the first half. They did hit the crossbar from Patterson. Yes, that was a missed opportunity. We're Fulham lucky potentially there. But in the end, guys, they saw the match out, and that's the bottom line. As we said at the beginning of the show, Fulham get all 3 points. So let's finish up by talking about man of the match. I find it hard to believe anyone would not pick on Bernd Leno. Okay, so let's go with the idea that it's Bernd Leno. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Who would be an honorable mention? Who should we be talking about besides Bernd Leno in this match? Max is thinking, I could see his thinking cap is on. So maybe I should go to Dan first. Dan, besides Bernd Leno, because it's obvious it's Bernd Leno as man of the match, who else stands out? Can I mention someone I'm going to mention in the second half? I want to talk about the improved crossing from Jedi. I thought that was something we should be mentioning. I could see a difference with Jedi in the second half, so I want to give him a shout out. But who else stands out to you?
I mean, you're right. I think we gave Robinson a 7. Both Robinson and Tete are much improved in the second half, as we talked about. The substitutes were all excellent and played a part in changing the game. I'd even say Sasa Lukic had a really good second half, in terms of playing that role much more effectively than he'd done in the first half. Wilson was much improved in the second half. Max has already mentioned what a great touchy, first touch of the second half. And sort of that was like a wow moment. Certainly on the stand, and even if Diop and Ream weren't exceptional, they improved. They headed everything away. And of course, you've got Bobby Decordova-Reid as we've already mentioned, second to Leno, indeed, Stephen. But I would just. Sorry, I muted myself. It was a classical away performance, and therefore they all deserve credit. It was a team performance. So you've always got to give everyone else a mark more than you would have done if you're right.
Okay, so you're saying a team effort. How about you, Max? Besides we talk about Bernd Leno, that's the obvious one. Who would be an alternative man of the match?
Yeah, I think it has to be Bobby. Alternative, just for being in the right place at the right time to put that in the back of the net and not getting his head down because he wasn't starting, which he probably expected to start. And he just has a fantastic attitude every time he steps on the pitch. I love that about him.
Okay, great. I agree with that. I just wanted to mention Jedi because I've been so hard on him, Dan, with his crossing. I just noticed a little bit of difference. And I think he's worked on it over the summer, so I wanted to give him a little credit. But I'm glad that we're focusing also on Bobby Decordova-Reid.
He gets really sensitive about people criticising his crossing. As a patriot and a strong American supporter, you should really be more encouraging.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Think about that for your next show. Maybe you should devote it entirely to your love of Anthony Robinson.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, listen, we've been going for a long time, so we should wrap this up. Before we go, I want to get final thoughts. First from Mr. Cohen. Final thoughts before we go.
Final thought is, as Dan said, we don't start the Premier League season very often with winning a match. So let's kind of let this sink in. Although the last time we did win a match at the start of the season was our relegation year under Martin Jol and Rennie Muhlenstein and Felix Magath. So let's just hope this season doesn't end like that one.
Okay, very good. Mr. Crawford, final thoughts.
I think I've extended this podcast long enough. I'm just delighted that we won, Max and Russ. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to come on and talk about Fulham with you as well.
Oh, it's been great. I really enjoyed doing the show with the two of you. It's been wonderful. And I want to mention this. Please do check out the Green Pole podcast. It's a wonderful podcast that Dan does, Alan Druitt does, and then I am forgetting the Serbian. Why am I Oscar? Oh, there was a goal that I saved myself.
Like a Serbian, so that's why you don't think he's a Serbian, but he's very proud of his faux Serbian root.
Okay, so I almost pulled off. I saved myself in the end. But
and Hamian.com, which is the one-stop shop for all Fulham news, the best site that covers it tremendously.
Okay, thanks for jumping in. You didn't give me a chance to go there.
I couldn't control myself.
Okay, very good. I'm glad that you mentioned Hamian.com. It is excellent. And
the checks are in the post, boys. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, let's finish up this show. For Max Cohen and Dan Crawford from Hamian.com and the Green Pole Podcast, along with Max Cohen on the Green Pole Podcast, my name's Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.